Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I just wanted to give a quick reminder that today's episode is the second story in James Scott's Witch Hunter series. And if you haven't heard it before or you need a refresher, go back to episode 5. Thanks, guys. Always Send a Witch Hunter. Written by James Scott. Read by Drew Grimm. When witch's power consumes the world, you will find my cross, unleashed, unfurled. The mantra of St. Brian, the first witch hunter. Glancing in the direction of Cade, Arthur questioned his decision to accept the bishop's mission and bring the hedge knight with him. Well, I didn't have a damn choice, he yelled at himself. The duo stood at the world's edge, gazing into the gaping darkness ahead. Neither of them had ever been so close to the cursed lands before, and though Arthur could only imagine what Cade was thinking, he was certain from the look of awe on his companion's face that they both shared the same feelings of dread and amazement. The cursed land stretched beyond the wall of eternal night, marking the edge of the known world, and whatever dwelled within remained a mystery to mortal men. Few dared to venture into its depths, and even fewer ever returned. No daylight could pierce the veil of darkness, and the only illumination was the sudden flash of lightning flickering upon the black skyline ahead. With each crash of lightning, a brief glimpse of a giant city could be seen in the distance. Beyond the edge of Afterworld, within the eternal darkness of the Cursed Lands, the looming city fortress of Nightshade stood ancient and worn. Its tall obsidian walls jutted upward from a treacherous, craggy bluff, like black teeth gnawing at the skyline. God help us, Arthur thought. It's true. The city of Nightshade was meant to lie on the edge of the Cursed Lands, not be swallowed by them. And whatever lived in that giant city now had sent word to the Bishop of Merca. Seizing the rare opportunity to dispatch an actual witch hunter, the bishop had requested that Percy Darkwhistle travel to Nightshade and witness firsthand if the correspondence was true. When a man as powerful and influential as the bishop made a request, even Arthur knew that it was more of a decree, and he had no choice but to oblige him. According to the bishop, it had been over a century since Merca had been in contact with the distant city of Nightshade. And according to their latest message, the city was clear evidence that the Cursed Lands were spreading once more. Arthur could feel the cross of St. Brian becoming warm in his inside coat pocket. It was doing that more and more lately. We have no choice but to go in, Cade. For what it's worth, whatever happens in there. I hope you die first. Cade shot Arthur a raised eyebrow and smirk that clearly said, "After you." Though they'd never quite seen eye to eye, Arthur had known Cade for over a decade. If it hadn't been for Arthur, Cade would have ended up on the gallows for chasing him into the South. Southerners loathed all slavers and bounty hunters. Even knights weren't safe from the fury of mob justice. Percy Darkwhistle was able to stop the citizens of Merca from hanging Cade after they found him unconscious from fighting the Snake's Head. Unfortunately for Cade, his leather armor gave away his profession. Bound by his code of honor, the hedge knight reluctantly vowed to stay by Arthur's side until his life debt was repaid. Now, The two were bound together in maintaining Arthur's con, as Percy Darkwhistle. If it had been any other man, Arthur wouldn't have trusted him, but Cade's word was as solid as contract, and Arthur knew firsthand that the knight's code mattered more to Cade than his own life. It's what made him so damn annoying, Arthur thought. If they turned back now and failed to deliver the bishop's response, Merca would discover it before they could escape north, and nothing would stop the gallows from swinging then. We just need to go in, hand the scroll to whoever's in charge of the city now, and then get out of here as fast as we can. Nothing more, nothing less. Unfortunately for Arthur, it was definitely something more. Something way more. Crossing over the boundary plunged both men into immediate darkness, as though they had passed through the mouth of a giant cave. Each lit a torch that seemed to offer less visibility than it would have under normal conditions, as the unnatural darkness eagerly swallowed the light beyond the path. Behind them, the daylight of the world seemed like a shimmering haze that slowly melted away the further they proceeded into the depths of the dark. Proceeding on hunchback horses, they slowly rode in the direction of Nightshade. The massive castle city loomed before them, and Arthur figured it was grand enough to belong in the north. Nightshade's towering black obsidian walls guarded an interior of stunning white marble, unlike anything either man had ever laid eyes on. The iron gate was already lifting as they arrived, and a small contingent of knights on horseback rode out in perfect formation to greet them. Each wore full plate armor, black as night, and carried lances long and pointy, looking ready to charge into battle if need be. The foremost knight raised a hand and made a strange gesture that only Cade seemed to understand. It appears they were expecting us, Arthur, Cade said while making a gesture with his left hand, as if in response to the lead Black Knight. Arthur was well aware that some knights were sworn to a vow of silence and were prone to only using a language of signs and gestures. The witch hunter and his hedge knight bodyguard followed the escort into Nightshade, the massive black gate closing shut behind them. When they passed through the first inner wall, both men were awestruck by the scene before them. Nightshade buzzed with life, overflowing with citizens. The white marble buildings were unlike anything Arthur had ever seen. People bustled in every direction, singing, selling, moving from one place to another. It was as lively and crowded as any city in the north. The people were dressed in elegant yet simple red silk robes. Their skin was pale as milk, and Arthur couldn't recall ever seeing a more beautiful group of people living together in all his life. The Black Knights led them to the innermost tower, but halted at the entrance, allowing no further escort. Arthur and Cade dismounted and stepped into the Lord's chamber with slow, deliberate strides. Both were still in awe of their surroundings. The sheer abundance of artwork alone was enough to make Arthur rich beyond his wildest dreams. As they reached the center of the chamber, Arthur and Cade were greeted by a giant of a man. Greetings, witch hunter. As the Lord of Nightshade, I welcome you warmly. I am Count Vlad Corvos. The Count was the tallest man Arthur had ever laid eyes on. His shoulders were broad and solid, his chin and nose sharp and well-defined. His baby blue eyes seemed to sparkle when caught at just the right angle. Greetings, Lord Corvos. On behalf of the Bishop of Merca, I bring you this scroll as a gesture of friendship and service. Service is formally accepted, witch hunter, May the Lord above bless you on this most dangerous mission." Arthur and Cade both shot each other looks, before Arthur turned to Lord Corvos. What? "I desperately need your help, witch hunter. The bishop withheld this from you so I could explain myself." Arthur took a deep breath and responded, "Please continue, Lord Corvos. What seems to be plaguing a city as powerful as Nightshade?" "My daughter has been kidnapped by a truly heinous creature. A witch who can control the minds of trolls. She does not seek a ransom, and I fear she will sacrifice my beloved Sabina to some cruel devil she worships." Arthur tried his best not to sound hysterical. "I see then. You wish for me to lead a rescue party. And how many hundreds of knights are you giving me?"
7.
700. That might just be enough.
Your sense of humor is amusing, witch hunter. I doubt there are 700 knights left in all the South. I'm sending you with the 7 finest knights of my personal guard. They will take you to the lair of Morna the Mindslaver.
The witch has a nickname. Fuck. It's never good when they have a nickname.
Along the broad cobbled path to the towering gates, Arthur and Cade rode hunchbacks beside a small group of black-armored knights, ready to set out on a dangerous rescue into the far reaches of the Southlands. The Lord of Nightshade, Count Corvos, stood on the walls above the gate, watching them depart, and Arthur was struck with the ominous feeling that the Count was watching him specifically. Shaking off the suspicion, he fell in beside Cade, who gave him a stern look. He didn't need to say a word for Arthur to know exactly what was on his mind. Though outwardly brave and stoic, Cade, like most Northerners, Arthur included, felt a deep unease about the things still living in the dangerous South. And now they were both going to face trolls of all things. About a mile past the gates of Nightshade, they spotted a faint haze ahead, shimmering slightly, as if seen through a thick veil of smoke. They recognized the haze as the border of the Cursed Lands, knowing that just beyond the wall of darkness, daylight awaited. This did not save them from the effect of being plunged suddenly into a brightly lit path when they crossed over the threshold, as though someone had suddenly turned on the lights. Arthur shielded his eyes as they adjusted to the sun, and even the well-trained black knights seemed to recoil uncomfortably. Their destination was more than a day's ride from Nightshade. Arthur hoped he had enough time to figure out a way to shake the Black Knights and escape north. He and Cade would take their chances and hope Mirka didn't find out until they were well on their way.
"I'd rather chance hanging than face certain death trying to fight a bloody troll."
Arthur was sure Cade felt the same way. They traveled hard through the entire day into the foothills southward, following the border of the Cursed Lands as a guide for miles. Arthur tried to ignore the wall of night, but his thoughts often strayed to what it meant for the darkness to be growing again. Several hours after the sun went down, Arthur was beginning to wonder if the Black Knights would ride on through the night, when they finally halted abruptly and made a hasty camp on the rise of a hill. Arthur hoped this could be their chance to escape, but that hope faded when all 7 knights took up guard around their camp. After only a few hours of sleep, Arthur was roused by the noise of the knights breaking camp, and they continued onward, to the west this time, toward a rocky outcrop of cliffs. Arthur and Cade shared a weary glance and fell behind the others, just out of earshot.
None of them slept,
Arthur said in a hushed tone.
Aye, and none of them have taken a drink of water, or used the privy either,
Cade whispered back. The Black Knights wore full plate armor and a helm that completely covered their heads and face. Arthur had never seen knights so disciplined.
Arthur, what the hell are we going to do?
I don't know yet, Cade. We're going to have to play this as we go.
That's what got us here in the first place. Percy.
Cade spat the name out like a curse.
If it weren't for me, Cade, you'd still be swinging from a tree. So just do us both a favor and follow my lead.
Arthur, what the hell are we going to do against trolls? You're not a real witch hunter, for Christ's sake.
Arthur didn't need reminding of that. For a brief moment, Arthur's mind drifted to his youth as a squire. Sir Leonard was teaching him knots.
Remember, Bird, mastering the rope might one day save your life, and learning to untie knots will teach you the patience to tackle the challenges life will undoubtedly send your way. Very good. Now practice untying them behind your back. You need to be able to see with your hands, just as well as with your eyes.
Arthur hadn't thought of the old man for a long time. The more time he spent around Cade, though, the more Sir Leonard's voice began to slip back inside his thoughts. The Black Knights halted abruptly, turning into a defensive stance. Arthur and Cade dismounted, readying themselves for whatever was going to happen. The captain of the Black Knights gestured to Cade with a hand signal, and then pointed forward.
I want you to go ahead, Arthur. By yourself,
Cade whispered.
Oh, really? And why the hell would I do that?
Arthur said flatly. Cade flashed a series of hand signals, then winced at the lead knight's reply.
It's an ogre, Arthur. A big one.
At least it will be quick, Arthur thought. Percy Darkwhistle, smashed to death attempting to save a woman he just heard of one day ago, from a city that hasn't been heard from in a century.
Arthur pulled the cross of St. Brian from his coat. It was the only card he could play at the moment. The moon was still out, and Arthur had just enough light to see the shape of something massive as he crept ahead. When Arthur got within 20 feet of the creature, he finally saw it in all its glory. It stood at least 12 feet tall and was as broad as a small hill, with a massive head and mouth that looked like it could bite a horse clean in half.
Brace yourself, Arthur. Perhaps I can chase it off charging it like a bear.
Arthur held his breath and accepted his fate. Holding the cross in front of him, he blindly charged the ogre, letting out a mediocre war cry in the process. The giant whipped around and immediately let out a scream that stopped Arthur dead in his tracks. The ogre's breath was strong, and Arthur hoped he gave the giant diarrhea for eating him. Something strange happened then. After a few seconds, Arthur opened his eyes to find the ogre staring intently at the cross of St. Brian, still clutched in his left hand. The ogre eased himself onto the ground, crossing his legs with deliberate slowness. From the depths of a massive knapsack, he drew out a giant wooden cross and lowered his head in a bow to Arthur. Arthur had to steady himself. He was shaking uncontrollably. Lowering his cross and standing before the ogre, Arthur returned his bow. Arthur, Cade, and the Black Knights sat before the ogre as it began drawing symbols in the dirt. The Black Knight seemed to understand this strange language, translating it for Cade, who then passed the message along to Arthur. Groth the Baptized was the ogre's name, and like his name suggested, he was a Christian. Arthur had little time to wrap his head around a baptized ogre when Groth hit him with something else. He had been waiting for the witch hunter to help assist him rescuing Sabina.
He says he saw you in a dream, Percy.
Cade was almost as stunned as Arthur was at the moment.
Ask him how we saved the girl, Cade.
Arthur had managed to control his breathing now, but was pretty sure he had wet himself earlier.
He says we follow him, Percy. Now, in fact.
Well, let's not make haste then.
Arthur stood up. Everyone began to muster to follow Groth. Arthur did manage to sneak over to Cade and grab him by his arm.
We either run now, Cade, or actually try to do this.
Cade gave Arthur a sympathetic look.
Arthur, I think maybe we are meant to be here, that we are meant to do this.
And with that, both men climbed onto their mounts and slowly trailed after their companions. Groth led them to a sprawling, rocky canyon, where strange metallic sounds echoed from deep within. They ventured inside, swords drawn, except for Percy. Arthur had sworn never to wield a sword again, favoring brass knuckles or something simple instead. This occasion, however, he gripped the cross of St. Brian in his left hand, while carrying a brass and wooden shield on his right arm. The further they ventured inside, the louder the noise had become. When Groth finally stopped and began to kneel, Arthur and Cade moved to the head of the group, looking now at the full view of Morna's lair. It was nothing like Arthur had imagined. Ore collecting machines lined the edge of the massive chasm, methodically hauling raw ore into carts, perched on metal tracks. Steam hissed, while cogged wheels clanked in a steady rhythm, their sharp metallic grind echoing through the air. Morna was wielding the technology of Beforeworld. She was harnessing the power of steam and electricity, things only the rich enjoyed in the north, and only the church was allowed to control and maintain.
Cade, ask the knights to ask Groth what the witch is kidnapping women for.
After translating from the knights, Cade made a face of disgust.
She's trying to breed a troll and human, Percy. Ask him if he knows where they are keeping Sabina. He says he can reach her, but we have to distract the witch. He can handle the trolls, but she would overpower his mind.
Arthur shared his plan, and the group went their separate ways. Arthur took a deep breath. Morna's canyon lair was teeming with mutated trolls. They were not nearly as big or tall as Groth, but they were bigger than people. Strangely enough also, the trolls weren't just mutated. They also seemed to have strange metallic devices embedded in their skulls. Arthur had no idea what was really going on here, and he didn't care either. He just wanted to survive this rescue attempt and get the hell out of this hellhole as quickly as possible. Walking as steady as he could manage, Arthur made his way to the center of Morna's lair.
Morna the Mindslaver, come forth and face judgment at the hands of Percy Darkwhistle.
The various trolls lumbering around seemed to ignore Arthur.
Well, I tried.
Before Arthur could finish his thought, though, a massive sound echoed through the canyon. A huge hidden door swung open, And at last, Arthur laid eyes on Morna, the mind-slaver. She was seated within the hollowed-out chest of a grotesque mutated troll, whose flesh seemed to be mixed with machinery. Her eyes were tiny beads of red, and Arthur thought she resembled a goblin more than a witch. The troll she rode began to lumber forward, and Arthur braced himself. If she charged him, he wasn't sure he could reach her with his cross in time.
Greetings, witch hunter. What a blessed day to see you standing before me.
And why would seeing me be a blessing for you, witch?
Because when I capture you and place you at the feet of Morgana Blacktongue, my reward will be sweeter than a child's eyeball, witch hunter.
Arthur couldn't help but make a face when hearing the Witch King's name.
Why the hell would the Witch King exactly care about me?
Because you drowned her favorite daughter, Percy Darkwhistle, the witch's bane.
Arthur felt all of the air leave his body. He began to get dizzy and fought to control the urge to throw up. Thankfully, Groth burst onto the scene like a juggernaut, giving Arthur a much-needed distraction from what he had just heard. Groth began slamming trolls left and right. Arthur ducked from the sheer power being displayed as trolls began flying in every direction. The Black Knights swept in from the left, spearing the raging trolls as they thundered toward them. Morna produced a strange-looking metallic rod and began pointing toward the charging knights. With a swift motion of her wrist, she lifted the lead knight into the air and flung him into a deep shaft, cackling and screaming with delight. Arthur pulled himself together and rose amid the carnage. Turning toward Cade's direction, he gave the signal, hoping it caught Cade's eye through the chaos. Cade took aim and fired a flaming crossbolt straight into the chest of the troll Morna was sitting in. The witch burst into flames and leapt from the troll, tumbling to the ground before Arthur. Looking into his face, she screamed something at him before he crushed her head with a massive shield blow. Arthur picked up the metallic rod she was wielding and placed it into his coat. He then bent over and heaved everything he had eaten over the last day. Groth emerged, holding something delicate in his hands, and gently placed a beautiful brunette with milk-white skin at the feet of the surviving Black Knights. They began to wrap her in silk cloth until she was completely covered head to toe. They then lifted her above them and began heading out from the canyon. Cade made his way to Arthur and placed a hand on his shoulder.
It would seem that fate is with us, Percy.
At least for today, Cade.
What did the witch scream at you before you finished her?
She screamed, "Van tires. Mean anything to you?"
Not a clue, Cade responded.
Me neither. Probably doesn't mean anything.
Unfortunately for Arthur, it definitely meant something.